Welcome back to Apexoraz, where we dive deep to surface with fresh insights. Hello, friends, and welcome back.
Great to be diving in again.
Today, we continue our deep dive into The Wisdom of Life by Arthur Schopenhauer. We're honing in on Chapter 2, Personality, or What a Man Is. This chapter really gets to the heart of, well, who we are and how that shapes our whole experience.
It's absolutely fundamental stuff, you know? Schopenhauer basically argues that our inner being, our inherent nature, that's the main lens, the lens for both happiness and suffering.
Right. It's a pretty powerful idea, isn't it? That what we are inside matters so much more than, say, what we have or what people think about us.
Exactly. Far more.
So the mission for this deep dive is to really unpack Schopenhauer's perspective on these core drivers of our well-being. We'll explore why he thinks this inner what a man is has such a profound impact.
And we're drawing straight from his text, trying to pull out those key insights for you.
Okay, let's get started. Schopenhauer kicks off by saying, personality, our individuality, is, and I quote, the chief thing to consider when thinking about happiness.
Yes, and it's just inescapable. You can't get away from yourself. Right. This individuality is the constant backdrop. It colors everything.
It's like a filter, as you said.
Yeah.
Every experience, good or bad, has to pass through our own specific disposition.
Yeah.
He uses that great analogy, the difference between enjoying oneself in Paris versus just enjoying Paris.
That's a good one.
Paris could be amazing, objectively, but your capacity to enjoy it, that's what dictates the actual experience.
That's basically someone with a, let's say, fundamentally negative outlook, Schopenhauer's term. They can find misery anywhere, even in paradise.
He compares it to tasting delicate wine with a mouthful of bitterness. Gall, I think he says.
Right, gall. It just ruins it. It really shows how our inner state can just paint over our entire reality.
And a really crucial point he makes is that personality effect on happiness is immediate. It's direct.
Yeah. Unlike external stuff, like wealth or status, those things can change. They can be affected by outside events. But our nature...
It's always there, a constant companion.
That's it. External factors are immediate and indirect, as he puts it. Their effect gets filtered. It can be neutralized, even.
So money doesn't automatically equal happiness. We all know that, really.
Right. But personality, its influence is always active. And this, he argues, is why envy of someone's personal qualities feels so intense.
Because it targets something that seems fixed, unchangeable.
Exactly. You're envious of their very being, not just something they possess. You can buy a fancy car, but you can't just buy a cheerful disposition.
It's right at the core. He even brings in Aristotle here, doesn't he? Something about character lasting, not wealth.
Yes. It is not wealth, but character that lasts. It really hammers home the enduring nature of our inner constitution.
Which then leads to his point about misfortunes, how the ones we cause ourselves through our own character are harder to take than external ones.
Absolutely. Fortune changes. It's fickle. But if your own tendencies trip you up, that's harder to swallow. And this brings him to what he calls subjective blessings.
Ah, yes, the subjective blessings. These are the inner qualities he sees as the first and most important elements in happiness.
Things like a noble character, a capable mind.
Yeah.
What else? Joyful temperament, bright spirits.
And good health, that classic idea. Mens sana in corpore sano. Healthy mind, healthy body.
And what's really key here is how Schopenhauer prioritizes these. He's saying, look, invest in these things, cultivate them, protect them, more than just chasing money or status.
Because these inner resources, they're the actual foundation of a happy life, according to him.
That's the argument. They're the bedrock.
And within that list, he really zooms in on one in particular, cheerfulness.
Cheerfulness. He calls it the quality that makes us most directly happy.
It's like it's its own reward almost.
Yeah, it's self-sustaining in a way. Yeah. He says, the man who is cheerful and merry has always a good reason for being so, namely that he is so. It just feeds itself.
That's quite profound, actually. It's potent, too, because it can make up for lacking other things, right? Like youth, looks, money.
Exactly. If you have that cheerful disposition, you can still find happiness even without those other sort of external advantages. He shares that little anecdote, finding wisdom in an old book.
Oh, yeah. The simple line, if you laugh a great deal, you are happy. If you cry a great deal, you are unhappy.
Deceptively simple, but it says a lot.
And his advice is just embrace it. When cheerfulness comes, just accept it. Don't question it too much.
Right. Don't wait for a good reason. It is the reason. It's the very coin of happiness, he calls it. Immediate value.
especially given how short life is, right?
Yeah.
It links back to living in the present.
Definitely. And he concludes basically that promoting cheerfulness should be a top goal if you're seeking happiness.
Now, right alongside cheerfulness, he puts massive emphasis on health.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
He contrasts how much wealth versus health actually contributes to cheerfulness.
Yeah.
And his observation is, well, it's quite striking.
He says you often see more cheerful faces among, like, working people in the country than among the rich.
Yeah, while the wealthy can often seem ill-humored or stressed, it challenges the common assumption that money buys happiness, or at least cheerfulness.
So maintaining good health is the foundation, the very flower of it, he says.
That's his view. And he gives pretty timeless advice for it. Avoid excesses, avoid strong negative emotions, don't overwork your mind.
Get outside every day, exercise, even cold baths.
Yeah, the cold baths.
Yeah. Oh.
Invigorating. And he stresses physical activity, quoting Aristotle again. Life is movement. Our bodies just need it to function well.
He uses that image of trees needing wind to get stronger. It's a good parallel. Our internal processes need that external motion.
And the impact of health goes way beyond just the physical feeling. It shapes how we see everything. He brings in Epictetus.
Men are not influenced by things, but by their thoughts about things.
Exactly. So if you feel healthy, vibrant, your whole outlook shifts. Things just seem brighter, more manageable.
He goes pretty far, saying 9/10 of our happiness depends upon health alone.
It's a strong claim, but his point is, without health, nothing else feels good. You can't truly enjoy wealth or success or anything if you're constantly unwell.
So the warning is, don't sacrifice health for other goals. Not for money, not for learning, not even for short-term pleasures. Protect it.
It has to be a priority. But while health is crucial, he does acknowledge it's not the only factor in our disposition. Temperament plays a huge part too.
Right. Our sort of innate tendency towards melancholy or cheerfulness isn't just about physical health.
He traces the root cause of melancholy back to our innate physical constitution, specifically the balance between sensitivity, how strongly we feel things, and our vital energy.
So being highly sensitive can lead to bigger mood swings, a more generally somber outlook.
That's the idea, abnormal sensitivity, as he puts it. And then he makes that really interesting link between this heightened sensitivity and genius.
Ah, the Aristotle connection again. That distinguished people in philosophy, art, politics often have that melancholic streak.
It's a recurring theme in history, isn't it? This potential connection between deep thought and a certain kind of, well, emotional depth that can tip into melancholy. He also uses Plato's terms.
The easy versus the difficult disposition. Eukolos and duskalos.
Yes, they react differently to pleasure and pain. The duskalos, the difficult one, feels negative things more intensely and positive things less so.
Well, the eukolos, the easygoing type, is the opposite. More sensitive to pleasure, less bothered by pain. It really shows how differently wired we can be.
And Schopenhauer points out a strange sort of compensation for the gloomy person, because they're always expecting the worst.
They end up being disappointed less often.
Kind of, yeah. But he also warns that deeper gloom can lead to a real weariness with life, even suicidal thoughts, sometimes triggered by seemingly small things.
It shows how much our underlying temperament affects our resilience. He contrasts the threshold for those thoughts in cheerful versus melancholic people. He also mentions beauty briefly, right, as an indirect help.
Yes, more about how it affects others' perception of you, influencing how they treat you. He quotes Homer on beauty being a divine gift. So after laying out these internal factors, he turns to the big enemies of happiness: pain and boredom.
The twin foes, he calls them.
Exactly. And he sees us as constantly oscillating between them. You try to escape pain, you often run straight into boredom, and vice versa.
He sees this playing out externally and internally. Externally, it's like poverty brings pain, but too much wealth brings boredom.
Right. The struggle for survival versus the emptiness of having no struggle. And internally, he links it to our minds again. Susceptibility to pain is inversely related to susceptibility to boredom. Meaning someone with a, let's say, less active mind, duller sensibilities, they might feel less pain, but they're much more likely to get bored because there's less going on inside. An inner vacuity, he calls it.
And that emptiness drives people to constantly seek external distractions. Gossip, pointless activities, chasing sensations.
Precisely. Anything to avoid confronting that inner void. But, Schopenhauer says, the best defense against boredom is cultivating inner wealth, wealth of the mind.
Because thought is inexhaustible. It keeps you engaged from within.
That's the idea. The more you have going on internally, the less you need from the outside. But there's a flip side.
More intelligence means more sensitivity.
Often, yes. Increased sensitivity to pain, stronger will, maybe more intense emotions, all amplified by imagination. It's a double-edged sword.
So people naturally try to set up their lives to avoid whichever suffering they're most prone to.
Makes sense, right? The intelligent person, more sensitive to pain and disruption, might seek peace and quiet, a tranquil, modest life, maybe solitude.
Because as he says, the more a man has in himself, the less he will want from other people.
Exactly. Contrast that with someone intellectually poor. They need society, constant activity, just to avoid being alone with their own emptiness. He quotes Seneca, "Folly is its own burden."
And Jesus, son of Sirach, the life of a fool is worse than death. Pretty harsh words.
They are. He then makes that observation about sociability correlating with intellectual poverty, using the example common in his time regarding Black people's sociability. We need to be clear, this is Schopenhauer reflecting his era's biases.
Absolutely. We're reporting his views, not endorsing them. It's important context for understanding his work, but not a reflection of modern understanding. He uses that brain as a parasite analogy too, doesn't he? And leisure as the fruit of existence.
Yes, and he criticizes how most people just waste leisure. They don't know what to do with it except kill time.
He distinguishes between killing time and using time.
Right. People with limited intellect, he argues, get bored easily because their minds are just wired for basic survival tasks. When there are no tasks, the mind stagnates. So they turn to things like card games.
He really wasn't a fan of card games, was he?
Not as a primary social activity, no. He saw it as a sign of intellectual bankruptcy, a way to simulate engagement when there's no real inner substance.
Even though some argue it teaches strategy or whatever?
He dismisses that, says it's ultimately demoralizing, teaching trickery and self-interest. His main point is, someone with inner wealth doesn't need cards to fill their leisure time. They have real thoughts, real interests.
Which leads nicely into his ideas on self-sufficiency.
Yes. The internally rich person is like a country that doesn't need many imports. They're content with what they have within.
Don't expect too much from others or the external world. Find happiness inside. He quotes Goethe and Goldsmith on this.
And Aristotle again. To be happy means to be self-sufficient. It's a recurring theme.
And this becomes even more important as we get older, right? When external sources of pleasure, looks, physical strength, even friends sometimes start to fade.
Exactly. Inner resources are the only truly lasting source of happiness throughout life. He paints the world as full of misery and boredom, and the internally rich person is like a warm, bright room inside, shielded from the bleakness outside.
Having a rich individuality, a good intellect, that's the happiest destiny, he thinks, even if it's not a flashy life. He mentions Queen Christina admiring Descartes' simple, intellectually focused life.
It's about prioritizing that inner cultivation, seeking independence and leisure to nurture the mind, moderating desires, not chasing external validation.
Resisting the urge to sacrifice inner peace for outward success. Okay, so inner wealth is key. But then he stresses activity is also necessary. Seems slightly contradictory.
Not quite. He's building on it. Referencing Aristotle again, pleasure involves activity, using our powers. Stobaeus defined happiness as vigorous and successful activity.
So our powers are meant to be used to overcome challenges. And unused powers lead to
Boredom, especially for the wealthy who might lack obvious external challenges. He quotes Lucretius describing the bored rich guy restlessly moving between houses trying to escape himself.
because there's no real mental engagement.
Often, yes. Or they resort to things like high-stakes gambling just to stimulate their will, to feel something. He observes people gravitate towards activities that use their strongest powers, physical, muscular, or intellectual.
Like sports for muscular types, intellectual pursuits for others.
Right. And he argues the nobler the power engaged, the greater the pleasure. So intellectual pleasures, unique to humans, are the highest form.
Because they stem from our developed sensibility, our capacity for thought.
Whereas ordinary folks, he says, are mostly interested in things that engage their will, personal gain, desires, which often involve struggle or pain. Even social card games he sees as just a mild tickling of the will.
Compared to the person of intellect who finds genuine interest in knowledge itself, in a realm free from that constant striving.
Exactly. He contrasts the life of the masses, caught between basic needs and boredom, with the life of the intellectually engaged person who finds endless fascination in nature, humanity, art, science.
And they need undisturbed leisure for this, for reading, thinking, observing.
Yes. Voltaire's line, "There are no real pleasures without real needs." The intellectual person needs that space to think. They essentially live two lives, he suggests, with the intellectual life becoming the main one.
A constantly developing inner world unlike a life just focused on external comfort.
So those with that superfluity of intellect are the luckiest, leading a life engaged in thought, relatively free from pain and boredom. He quotes Seneca again. Illiterate leisure is a form of death.
A living tomb. Powerful. This engagement protects against boredom and its pitfalls. He even jokes his philosophy, while not making him rich, saved him money on distractions.
Which brings us to the Philistine.
The opposite of the intellectually engaged person.
Right. The Philistine puts all their happiness in external things, possessions, status, sensual pleasure. So their happiness is unstable. Their center of gravity is outside themselves.
Always shifting, depending on external circumstances.
He contrasts this with people with some intellectual interest, maybe dilettantes in art or science, whose center is partly within. But true genius, the center is entirely within.
Which explains why truly brilliant people might seem less interested in typical socializing. They don't need it in the same way.
Exactly. Their inner world is so rich, they might even feel alienated from the trivial concerns of others.
So Schopenhauer really doubles down. The intellectually wealthy person is the happiest, subjective over objective. Like illusion, the wealth of the soul is the only true wealth.
All they really need is that undisturbed leisure to cultivate their mind. He cites Aristotle, Socrates via Diogenes Laertius. They all praise leisure as essential for the highest life, the philosophical life.
Aristotle's Ethics points to philosophy as the happiest life. And Goethe again, finding happiness in using your innate talent.
But the reality check, undisturbed leisure is rare. Most people have to work, and exceptional intellect is also rare.
So the ideal combination, great intellect and leisure, is uncommon, but creates the potential for this higher life, free from the worst of pain and boredom.
Though he does acknowledge the downside, again, high intellect might mean higher sensitivity to pain, more intense emotions, and the world does offer more pain than pleasure.
Plus, that feeling of being estranged from ordinary life. He even mentions the saying that maybe the narrow-minded are the happiest, in a way, contrasting views on wisdom and happiness from Sophocles and the Old Testament.
Then he defines the Philistine again. No real mental needs, pleasures are mainly sensual. Bored when basic needs are met, reliant on shallow fun, no real interest in art or ideas.
Their social life, driven by basic needs, maybe even resenting intellectual types out of envy or insecurity.
He contrasts their need for often disappointing or dangerous realities with the calm, limitless ideal world accessible through the intellect, and notes this chapter mainly covered physical and intellectual aspects.
Okay, wow, that was a deep dive into chapter 2. So bringing it all together, the big takeaway from Schopenhauer here is this huge emphasis on our inner world, right?
Absolutely. Personality, temperament, intellectual richness, these are the primary drivers of how we experience life, how happy or unhappy we are.
And his argument is that cultivating these inner things, cheerfulness, health, engaging the mind, that's what truly builds resilience and fulfillment, much more than chasing external stuff.
It gives you a foundation that isn't so easily shaken by, the ups and downs of fortune or circumstance.
It definitely leaves us with something to think about. So for you listening, how do you balance seeking external markers of happiness versus nurturing your inner world, your personality, your health, your mind?
Yeah, reflecting on Schopenhauer's points, could shifting that balance, maybe putting a bit more focus inward, lead to a deeper, more lasting kind of well-being, something to mull over?
A great question to end on. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Schopenhauer's wisdom. Be sure to follow Apexoraz on YouTube, Spotify, X, Instagram, and Threads, and join us on this journey of deeper thought and intentional living.